Like, just our
This is
normal.
this is how it always goes. I just want you all to know.
Love it.
I'll let you know when it is actually live. I don't think it is yet. We'll see.
Will we know if people are on, or only you know that?
You could go look. You could pull up the link. I have the link right here. I'm going to post it in some of our
Oh,
channels. We are live now. Let me just get the link, and I'll give it to you all.
that was good.
You know when it is actually live. There we go. Okay, we are live. Let's see. I'll give you all the link, and then give me just a second to post it in my Discord and Telegram. If one of you wants, you can post it in the CCA student chat. And just see if any of them want to come join us. Okay.
Who wants to come hang out?
Are you putting it in, Yellen?
Let me try.
I can. I just didn't know if you were typing who wants to come hang out.
Luna ladies hang out.
All right.
Cool.
All right. I'm putting it in the student office hours.
Awesome. Okay, well, welcome whoever is watching live and or the replay. So yeah, welcome back to the Luna Den. I've brought on 3 of my favorite women. I'll let you each introduce yourself in a moment before I just kind of share a little bit of why we're doing this and the intentions behind this call. So I share this in Telegram, but every week I bring on, I basically started a community of some women in CCA. We've talked a lot about CCA in the Luna Den, but for those who don't know what it is, one of you might actually be able to give a better description. I never give a well-worded description of what we learn about in CCA, so I'll let you do that. But I started it because in the CCA, we're learning a lot of principles and it's a lot of teaching, and we're sitting and we're just digesting the information. And I think for all of us, we wanted a place where we could come together and just reflect weekly and share what we're learning, and also just to hang out. And these calls are very chill. They're very organic. We just let whatever flow. And I figured it was a good opportunity to bring them into the Luna Den so that we could have some of these conversations live, depending on how useful or not that they are for others. I guess we'll see how this goes. And what we're going to do today, just decided this on the fly, is we have something in the CCA and that Nick also does in Nick's Miss called 6-word updates. And essentially what they are is a very condensed version of whatever is happening, whatever is like prevalent in life right now, in 6 words. And I know for a lot of us, this can be really challenging to condense down like what's happening in life into 6 words. So I've actually never done a 6-word update live, so this will be fun for me. So we're going to start with that and let the conversation go from there. And what we'll do, actually, I'm thinking, ladies, is we'll just, as we go through the 6 words, I'll let you introduce yourself. Just share like what it is that you do in the world, a little bit about you, and yeah, we'll go from there. So whoever wants to start. And also, will one of you just give a little brief overview of your perspective? I actually think what might even be better about sharing about CCA is like your perspective of what it is and what it's done for you, rather than just even like the description Dan or Nick would use. Because something else that I didn't mention that I think is really important is us females have quite a different perspective around these principles than a lot of the men do. And that is another intention in the Luna Den, is to bring about like what's the female perspective of these principles and how we're using them in our lives in probably an entirely different way than the men would even know to speak about. So I think it would be powerful for one of you to share. I'm just gonna let Yelena, you're gonna go first, and then we'll go.
Okay, well, I'm Yelena.
You always get called on anyways, so
yeah. So funny. That's so funny. That's true. Yeah, interesting question about the CCA itself, because people often ask. I think there is just so much conversation and buzz around CCA in general in our community and the peripheral of our communities, and people always ask like, well, what is it about? And I think commonly a lot of people are like, well, it's hard to explain. And I think part of that is because the principles are so timeless in a way that people really extract what they need from the experience. At least that's how it was for how it is and was for me. And the way I've described it too in the past was like, it's leading you into your sovereignty. So like understanding who you are at a deep level, like deepening your awareness of self. And then we talk a lot about like playing your game, like what does that look like? What does that mean for you? And I think all of us kind of realize and see how much of what we believe and act upon unconsciously are like adopted beliefs from just conventional wisdom that's been around. So it's like breaking the shackles of that and stepping into your sovereignty. That's what CCA is.
Well said. Love it. Love it. Okay. Share a little bit about yourself and your 6-word update.
Yeah. So my 6-word update is practicing consistency and living with high intention. I can expand on that a little bit more later, but essentially the high intention is like, I'm really dissecting a lot of pretty much every area of my life, but specifically my relationships, my money relationship, personal relationship. And as you ladies now, I'm bringing something to the world that's like my soul baby right now. And it's a new expression of my work. It's a new iteration of my work. And so I'm really looking at being really intentional with how I'm doing that and what I'm choosing. And so living in that high intention day to day is kind of my experience right now and what I'm focused on.
Love it. Well, okay. So why don't you just make mention of what it is that soul baby that you're creating right now is, so people have an idea.
Yes. So I'm curating a transformational live event. It's going to be set right here in Tulum. I live in Tulum full time. It's a magical place. So I'm bringing together purpose-driven entrepreneurs for what I'm calling a quantum leap experience. And it's going to be a 2-day transformational event, bringing in other facilitators to have like a integrated mind, body, spirit experience for people to step into their highest vision, to envision that next level for themselves. And that's what I'll share about it.
Did you share? I apologize if I missed it. Did you share the name, the quantum
leap experience? Yeah.
Do you want to just give a tiny overview of where that comes from?
Yeah. So I think honestly, that name just kept coming to me, and part of the reason is a lot of people sort of in my world and entrepreneurs and purpose-driven people who are really growth-oriented, there is this essence that we're always in the midst of an evolution or in the midst of a quantum leap experience, which is you're either at the cusp of it, you're in the middle of it, or you're like integrating your most recent quantum leap is how at least I feel and the people in my world all experience. And it's this space of stepping into essentially your future self, stepping into your highest vision and aligning your life to that really intentionally. And like find like what are the little things that are misaligned with that highest vision of myself, that future version of myself, and closing the gap on that by aligning your life to that now, to that expression now. And it's really practical, but it's also energetic and spiritual in my experience. So that's where the quantum leap experience comes from.
I love it. I wanted you to share a little bit about the name because I love the name, and I think there is a lot that actually goes into the name itself that can, on like an internet marketing scale, it can seem very woo-woo, yet getting to watch you integrate like things that we are learning into that experience, I think is going to be really powerful. So I'm excited about it. And I love that 6-word update. It's really good. Okay, Joyce, Renee, which one of you wants to go next? And I'll do mine last.
Go ahead, Renee.
I'm like, I can go. Give Joyce a little more time. Okay, so I actually have three 6 word updates, two for CCA to describe CCA, and then I'll give my 6 word update.
Wonderful.
So for me, CCA is how to be a better human, and the sub line of that or subtitle of that is CCA is about capacity, not content. And
Mm,
so, how to grow, how to think about things, not what to think, how to grow your own capacity using the filters and tools that we learn. Um, and CCA is so much about the community. Like I've met all of you wonderful ladies through there, and yeah, the community and the synergy that can happen. So it's, but at its core for me, it's really about how to think, not what to think.
I love that. Those are really, I think portraying the way CCA impacts us as opposed to, like you were saying, the content. It's not just about the content.
Hmm.
It's really useful for people who have no idea what's going on. So I love it.
Yeah.
Did you share your personal one yet?
So my personal one is stillness is key to seeing opportunities. Yeah. So a little bit about me and then why that is relevant, particularly now, is so I have a business background. I currently work with mostly leaders in high tech or healthcare as an executive coach and a leadership development consultant. But I also have a mindfulness based preschool that I started like 12, 13 years ago. And what I love now being connected with CCA and the Wolf Den is that so many of the principles that we're learning that I now have language for are some of the concepts that I've been teaching young children and parents through that. And so, really, my preschool is around helping parents see how their children can play their own game, and then just kind of setting the foundation and perspective for that. And then what I found in my work with leaders is that it's the same as helping them play their own game, but now I'm helping remove the layers of conditioning and self-limiting beliefs and all that so they can get back to their authentic self. Whereas the preschool is working with the children, but through the parents so the parents can allow their kids to be themselves, and then where the parents can start recognizing their biases and their conditionings that they're placing on them, and then how to align like the family values with what they want for their kiddos, because each, even with the same parents, the kiddos are each individual people. So my work has been really busy in a good way the past 6 months, and I'd say the past few weeks I've been able to just fit in more stillness, be with my family more, and just feeling that spaciousness has been amazing. And even though I knew that cognitively, it was just with what everything going on with work was harder to carve out that time, and so I had to get really, really intentional about that. And I can feel the benefits of it both from a mental health perspective and from an opportunity business perspective.
I also just want to add, Renee, I think that the work you're doing with like preschool and children, it's something that we talk a lot about in our weekly calls, is how as adults we're unlearning quite a big chunk of CCA is unlearning.
Yeah.
It's unlearning everything you were taught that wasn't playing your game. It's unlearning everything that told you to be anyone other than yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of taking the approach of, what if instead of having to unlearn when we became adults, we could just teach children properly and like allow them to be who they are,
Yeah.
so that they don't have to do this work when they're older, because it's not going to be necessary.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see. I think there's someone else in CCA who's taking that approach with children, and I just don't think there's a better way to take the CCA principles out into the world, is to quite literally like undo. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we have to undo, but what if we could take that step away and let the kids never have to go through that? So I really respect and value the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And did you want to share a little bit about that 6 word update?
Oh yes. So um, That's still, so my background, the preschool is a mindfulness based preschool. So my background in mindfulness was all around just one, settling the nervous system from a really secular perspective. Is like, how do you settle the nervous system to free up the mind for clarity? And from that, things happen in waves, right? Like, you can know something, but that doesn't mean that you're doing it in practice. And so through the experience of actually practicing mindfulness meditation, stripping away so much of my the things that I would do, the actions I would take based on perfectionism, based on like just having a type A personality and always wanting to be on the go, bringing that stillness in was a huge transformation in my life. And so when I was busy in the past 6 months, really knowing that the only thing I really needed for my personal system and the way to play my game is like, I need more stillness. I need more space to do nothing, to hang out with my family. And so I've pretty much been on like vacations for the past 4 to 6 weeks. And through that, like, I can really feel the visceral effects in my nervous system and the clarity in my mind really opening up, especially in the past couple of weeks. So, otherwise it's like you're just focused on like the calendar and what needs to happen next, and you stay so short-sighted that now there's like, because of that stillness, because of the hanging out on the couch or by the pool or in the water or wherever with my family, then there's just much more clarity in being able to see and feel the different like intuitive hits that you can get from that. So
1,000%. The power of doing nothing. I think we can all relate to that. We can all use a good chunk of that in our lives. I'm glad you bring that up. It's actually a good reminder for me. So that's a good one. Thank you.
You ready, Joyce?
Joyce, you ready? Have you had enough time? Better had about 30 minutes now.
We'll find out. Yeah. So CCA to me has really been about the feeling that it's given me, because I've been, and Ben, my husband, we've been in a lot of like different groups and masterminds and things like that. And they have frameworks and they have, principles. That's great. But the difference with what I really felt with CCA is like this application, like this, like I can really see it playing, like being applied in my life in every avenue, from like how I parent my kiddos, right, to one of my kids has ADHD, so she's like a firecracker, and just like and letting her figure out and step into her own, right, and being a child, and like seeing how am I showing up as a mom, and I can take all these principles and really apply it in being a mom and being an entrepreneur and what we do, and we work with youth kids as well. And so for me, this feeling that CCA has given me is priceless. Like I feel comfortable, almost to say, like comfortable to be myself, right? And I haven't felt like that like ever in my life. Like like starting CCA, and all of a sudden it's like gave me this permission to just like who are you? Like learning who I am and actually just like being okay with that. And to Courtney's point, is unlearning all these things. Like I've been pretending, not knowingly, but like, do I really like doing this? Do I really like doing that? And I've just like now taken a lot of time and saying, like, if it doesn't spark joy, then I probably shouldn't be doing it. And so just really the ultimate thing for me was like being empowered to play my own game and bringing my weirdness forward. Like I'll definitely say I'm an absolute weirdo, and I'm good with it now. And that's what CCA's given me, this ability to feel comfortable in my own skin. And to me, that's absolutely priceless. So when somebody asks me what CCA is, I don't even want to talk about all the principles and the frameworks. They're unbelievable. But what I believe you're going to get is that quantum transformation, like where you're all of a sudden comfortable with being who you are. And doing it's almost opposite of everything. It's fun. It's interesting. Like everything's inverted. Like, and so for me, that's what CCA means to me, is it's this feeling of empowerment that I really haven't gotten anywhere else. And then and for me, what makes it extra special is I get to share it with my husband. We do it together, and so it's a really unique experience, to learn it together and have different perspectives on it, right? As we're business partners, husband and wife, mom and dad. So we have a lot of different perspectives on how we take the information in. So that's CCA to me.
Oh my gosh, Joyce, give me like, I get goosebumps hearing you talk about it, because I think that's the whole embracing who you are and the joy. I can feel the joy emanating from you as you speak about it. And I just know through our relationship how important this is in your life. So I'm really happy and glad to hear you sharing that stuff. And I do think it's a very true and honest portrayal of what has been like offered in CCA, not just through a principal standpoint, as you were saying, but like you have to think about the way these men who are teaching it, Dan, Nick, Randy, it's just like a reflection of the way they live their lives. Essentially, here is how we live. Now we're going to give permission for you all to do the same. And I think for all of us in this crew, this ladies crew, we're very, very grateful for that, because it's a ripple impact in our lives. And especially to hear the way that's impacting your girls is really exciting for me. So I love it.
They model the behavior so much. And that's what's so powerful, right? Because there's so many people out there who teaches like anyone can teach. But for me, it's like wisdom. Wisdom is being able to apply that, but you see them doing it. And they also create such a safe environment. Like for women too, like it can be very intimidating to be in a group of like a lot of men, or for example, right? And you're just like, and then all of us are probably type A anyway, so we're probably fine in it, those types of things. But still, it's like the way that they create this community. Again, it's hard to articulate, because it's such an emotional thing. Like they've created such an amazing community where I feel like you have like a group of people, whether it's men and of course this women's group, that are supporting you and cheering you on and like really there for you. Like they want to see you win. And then they're also there for you when you need support, and they know the difference with how to show up and support you. So it's just a really amazing community that was like an interesting byproduct that happened from CCA. That again is another priceless thing that I never imagined that I would feel like such deep connections with so many people, especially this group, where I'm like, wow, I have my power posse. They're like my girls are with me, and it's awesome to be able to feel that, because sometimes you don't feel that in your everyday world. You'd go into CCA class or our call, which I look forward to every week, and then you go back into the real world, and then you realize like how far you've come and where some people still are, and no judgment, right? It's just that's where they are, and you're like, wow, I have to praise myself a little bit by going, wow, I've really grown. The time that I've taken and the effort and to learn these things and try to apply it, like I see where I've grown. And so
yeah, I love it. I love it. What's your 6-word update? Did you get one?
I do. I'm tuning out the external chatter.
Ooh, this is a good one.
Yeah.
Say more.
Well, I think I was telling you before we jumped live was that like the last 6 weeks, I think I was like taking a detox from a lot of like listening to a lot of like classes or whatever it is. Like I just felt like I had a lot of external chatter in my head, and I wasn't hearing myself anymore. I was like, I got lost in all of this learning, and so I just wanted to take a step back and create the space and the stillness for myself, where I could just hear my own voice again and journal and just go really slow. Like I felt like I was going to one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and filling space with the next class or the next video, the next audiobook. And I just wanted to take a step back and connect again in alignment with myself, my mind, my body, like that visceral experience. Like I felt like I was disconnected. I had a lot of interference with my inner being. So I just took a kind of a detox away from listening to things. But I'm coming back in full force. A lot of great content. I see you currently putting things out there. So I'm like, all right, I'll start integrating it back in.
Well, I think that's an important point, is like the overload of, and it seems to be a theme between like with what you and Renee both said. Even the stuff like the content we create in Luna Den and CCA, like there is a lot of content just within our small community. And I can't even imagine with all the extended content that's out there. Like there is we are in the information time. So it can be easy to just constantly be consuming. And if we fail to recognize that necessary timing of now reflecting, and that's a huge part of actually CCA, right? Is you could sit and listen the whole time and gain the knowledge, but if it's not being implemented into your life, who cares? And the ability to do that is through exactly what you and Renee are speaking to, is like the space, the time to be able to sit with yourself. Elena had a great quote that she put in our group a few weeks ago. I can't remember what it was. Elena, was it like, or maybe it was both you and Renee. You both had one, like knowing who you are when you're alone, essentially.
Oh, yeah. Who are you when you're alone?
Yeah, that was like that was your last 6-word update. And it's such a great reminder that although a big part of what we do and what we love about what we do is our community, is also to be, and the content and everything we learn, but then to be able to go and be with ourselves, reflect upon all this information that we're learning and know what it means to us. Without that piece, none of it actually matters. So
yeah, that's so in CCA, right? You're right. I think they call it like engage, reflect, engage again, and that's so important.
Yep.
Because making sure that you're not just consuming, because you can consume and then you get lost in it, but that you're actually taking it and applying it into your world is huge. And that's and then with these communities, like we get to do it all the time, and we get to share about like how we did a thing that all of a sudden the CCA principle popped up that we didn't realize, right? And then and that's how we learn. At least that's how I learn.
Yep.
Like I don't necessarily hear it and then I'm like, ooh, I get it 100%, right? I have to like, I'm the kind of girl that touches the hot stove when you say, do not, like, Joyce, do not do it. And I will be like, yep, 100%.
Sometimes it takes me like 7 times. Don't ask my boyfriend, but I'll touch it like 7 times. Like, still hot? I don't know. I'm going to try it again.
Maybe over here. Maybe with one finger.
It's so funny because like you know, I have mirrors all around me, right? Like my daughter, I have through my daughter having ADHD, I found out like, whoa, I have it too, right? And so I have like a late diagnosis of ADHD, which now I'm like, yes, let's go. Now that I know, let's use this as my superpower. But like I'm here getting all triggered by my daughter, and I'm like, oh my god, Ben's like, do you see what's happening here? Like, that's you. I'm like, oh my god, like, okay, got it. Case in point, you know. So
I appreciate that a lot though, because two points actually. One, you're talking about the consumption, the constant consuming of information. Nick has actually been talking about it a lot. Nick Smith is like, dopamine without effort will destroy someone. And how easy is it to not realize we're doing that? I actually noticed I was getting really good about not getting on social media, like deleting all the apps off of my phone, but I left Pinterest because I was like, I'm not affected by Pinterest. And I went and looked at the time I was spending every week on Pinterest, and I was like, okay, well, but I just make that a point because it's like, it holes in the cracks where we don't realize that consumption and how it's affecting us until we get to the point where it's like, I've been running on pure dopamine, and without that stillness and space, where like stillness is not scrolling on Facebook all day, and it's not sitting and watching movies and Netflix and such all day. It's actually having time to just literally be with yourself. Because then, to what you're speaking about, Joyce, the mirrors, if we don't, this is in my experience, if we don't have that stillness and space with ourselves, when mirrors pop up, we won't see them as mirrors. We will think that they are, as Nick says, windows, and we'll project, and it'll be all about the other person. So then it could be, no, this is just my daughter. Only my daughter acts like this. This has nothing to do with me. When it's like, no, actually, she's literally your child. I mean, and mirrors can show up in not just children, right? You know, it can be partners, it can be business partners. But without that engage, I think is what, or no, reflect part of CCA, we will never ever see these mirrors as mirrors, and we will always think it's about the other person. So I'm really happy you bring that up.
That's a great like awareness point, because sometimes like it's hard to know like how do you get awareness if you don't know. But like often for me, like if I feel defensive, I know there's a mirror. Like what am I like? I'm fighting something here. Obviously, it's something within, or yeah. So like that's a huge thing for me. It's like anytime I feel defensiveness, I know I need to go journal on it, because there's something there. That I don't like, and I know it. And or when when I think it's somebody else, that's another trigger. When I'm like, oh yeah, this person, and I'm like, okay, that's there's something there. I don't know what it is, but there's something there.
Yep. So. Yeah. Defensiveness is a good one to check. Like I just think body awareness wise, and Renee, you might know a little bit more about that being a part of your work, but I've just recognized that within myself is if I'm feeling defensive, I usually just pause and like try not to do I just don't do anything in that moment, because I recognize that any action I take out of that defensiveness is just me trying to avoid what's actually happening. So yeah. Okay, I feel like there's so many different directions we could go down that conversation, all just because I put you all on the spot, and I will do my 6-word update. And then if we want to back up any of those topics, we can. So my 6-word update for CCA, I'll do 2 kind of like you did, Renee, my CCA one and then a personal one. So my CCA 6-word update is, who am I more than enough? So for me, which is definitely a conjunction of what all you ladies have shared thus far, CCA has been, I would say, mostly an opportunity to embrace who I am. As I was saying about the work that you do, Renee, with kids, and Joyce, you being able to reflect this in your children. I think unlearning everything I've been taught that just wasn't necessary has taken quite a bit of time, and it continues to, like, it's an ever-going journey. But to be in a community and environment that's constantly, not just through content, but just community, conversation, reflection, opportunity to find out who I really am, which also includes acknowledging the things that I don't necessarily love to see about myself, like in the mirrors when I feel defensive, but then also recognizing like the quirks in me, the things that I thought were wrong, the things that I thought I had to filter out, the ways I thought I had to adjust myself in order to be successful. World is so not necessary. I think is one of the most liberating parts of CCA. I mean, we're learning a lot. There's a lot of content, a lot to digest through, but you can't quite put to words just being in the room with these people. And you all know that from going to the events. Elena hasn't been yet, soon. But just being in the room with people who share the same language, who are kind of doing this together, is that quantum leap, if so you will. So I'll leave it at that. My personal one, just timing right now in my life is, and this is a conversation that us girls have been having just this last week or so, is waiting is wanting, just press go. And I'll just do a tiny bit of an overview on it, is that I think we are given a huge opportunity through this experience to leverage time and understand ourselves through time. And then there's this part where waiting for me has become a factor where I feel as if I'm going to wait for this specific moment to allow all of these things that I'm learning to come forth. Like on this day, it's very future paced, and it's also past reflective, and it's not present. It's like not living in the now. And I bring in waiting as wanting, because I think it has a lot to do with like expectations, expecting things to be different than they are, attachment to outcomes, and all of those things. All they do is tell me, like I tell myself, like I have to wait for a perfect moment to take the action I know that is necessary to take, which then never allows me to take imperfect action. Like I have a copywriting background, and within copywriting, it's like perfect spelling and all these things that really just don't matter. And if we're looking at the principle in CCA, which is frequency, intensity, and purpose, which is essentially just like taking the action over and over again. And as Dr. Jeff says, action organizes. So that's been a big one for me. So that's mine.
It's a good one.
So what have you been taking action on lately that you were waiting for in the past?
Way to put me on the spot. I love it. Of course, if I'm going to put you on
Just flip the table.
yeah, thank you. I much appreciated. Someone has to put me on the spot. No, I'm glad you say that. So a big one actually, Joyce, is writing. I shared, so what I do a lot is I just journaling in CCA is what we do, and it's a great space for me to brain dump things that I'm processing. However, like background copywriting, it's very polarizing opposite. It's like perfect structure and always editing things and going through it like 5 times before you have this nice sales page. And all of those things are great. There's an art to it. But at the same time, kind of what happened with me is I put a stop to my copywriting career in the fall just because I was over all of that part of it. Like I really hated the idea that I had to edit all of my work all the time. And so recently I just recognized that I still love writing. It's something I love to do. And I would share things with you ladies every once in a while that I was writing, but I wasn't really giving myself an opportunity to just be consistent with it, regardless of, again, outcomes, perfect writing, etc. So I've just been writing again. And I mean, and that's not the only thing. I think just having things in my life, and I had a good conversation with Nick about this when I was in Austin a few weeks ago, is like part of what the intention in journaling in CCA is that you are literally putting yourself in the action every day of doing something, not with any expected outcome. Like there is no expected outcome. And that's the point of frequency, intensity, and exposure, is that you're just doing it. You're just doing it consistently. And unless that's part of the process, you'll never find the purpose piece. Because we always go into a hobby or a career or these things that we're doing with the idea that it's going to give us purpose, but unless there's that frequency piece, we never get to intensity, which means we never find purpose. So for me, that has been writing. I started some Medium articles just for me personally that are nothing, like they're not Luna Den related, they're not, so I can't really hide behind anything. It's just like me, Courtney, sharing my very, very unedited thoughts. And I'll post the link to that Medium channel in here. But I think other things too have been, I have a piano in my office, so I put it in here so that I would start doing piano more often. And Petey knows he'll like be in the other room, and if I'm playing and he hears me start like banging on the keys, getting upset, or just being like, this is stupid, he'll like call me out and be like, are you playing for fun? Is this serious? Is there a recital coming up I don't know about? So yeah, I mean, just I've inhabited quite a bit of hobbies lately that I'm just doing to do, baking, playing basketball. So just things like that. It almost sounds like being a kid again. And essentially it kind of is, because I think as a kid, if we're taught that everything is about winning and being perfect, and I understand the finite game within that we can play, but if we miss the infinite game of just playing to play, everything becomes really serious and then we lose purpose. So that's mine.
That is there's so much to unpack in what you just said, like so many amazing gold nuggets there.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked that question, because I knew you started the Medium articles, and I'm following you. I love it. Like it's so raw, and it's so like, that's you taking those action steps is inspiring, even for us to see that you maybe you had some negative narrative or limiting belief of something, and then now you're just like, here's the step, like you did the Medium article and just playing the piano. So you're like, you're teaching yourself again, like, because as adults we just feel like if we're doing it, it's all of a sudden it's like, well, how do I make this my professional career? And it's like, dude, you're just taking one piano lesson, like, but we can't, like, at least for me, like I'll do the same thing. Like Ben's like, like, because I wanted to buy DJ equipment, and I'm like, I'm gonna start DJing, and like he's like, you're not gonna start DJing, like what are you talking about? Like everything is always about, like, my brain just takes me to that outcome. Yeah. And so like you mentioned, I'm trying to relearn and like that, no, like you can do something for fun. It doesn't have to be your next professional career, and so it's amazing to see you stepping into that and baking. I know I like you're baking sourdough bread, which looks delicious, and that's awesome. Like looking at the things that spark joy in your life, and people forget or don't realize the power and the impact of doing those things, like being a kid again and having those magical experiences for what they are, and not trying to create some outcome to it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I'm like, as I'm mentioning the things that I'm doing, like, actually, these were all things that I really loved as a kid. Like, I loved to bake. I loved music. I loved swimming. I just loved play. I loved writing. But when everything, as you're speaking to Joyce, is about like, but it has to get me this place. Like, I have to get straight A's. Otherwise, worst case scenario, like I die if I'm not the best at piano. It's like, it's crazy, but I know that most people can probably relate. And so again, unlearning, like this is all a lot of unlearning. And the beauty that comes with that is then the opportunity to just be in the experience, and be also requires you to be, this is another like lesson, probably CCA mixed with stuff I've learned just from Nick Smith and Nick, is being a student is essentially how to create mastery in your life. Is, can I go every single time I play piano, it's like the first time I play, can I approach it that way, or do I have to be perfect because I practiced one time yesterday and I never touched it before? It's these weird expectations we place on ourselves, when in reality the only actual way to learn and to really learn is to go into the experience as if I've never done it before. And I can't speak to that. I will just be transparent. I can't speak to that saying that's something I've ingrained within myself, because it is quite challenging for me. I still find those, like a bias within me is like this perfectionist tendency that I want to be really good at it every single time instead of just doing it because it's fun. And it's not always fun. And I also will say that, like, I think a lot of these actions too, they may not always feel fun. I don't think that always, because that's yet another expectation and another goal, when again, there's no expectations, no goals. We're just doing it because we're being frequent about it. So another case in point.
I love that you bring all that up, especially, you know, with the work that I've done with kiddos and stuff, but the one from the mindfulness background and just from some of the Zen lineages and things like that is beginner's mind, right? Like that's the phrase we use, is approaching it with a beginner's mind, and that's what toddlers do, right? Like they're discovering for the first time. And so for adults to do that, the concept of play, I love, and integrating that with adults, because I forgot how to play. I don't know how to play. I don't know if I ever knew how to play, you know, like just with my upbringing and immigrant parents and things like that. Like you actually lose your ability to play. All kids know how to play, but you lose it because all of the conditioned and the, you know, the things in the way that you're raised, or if you don't have experience with people playing with you, because through play it's just experimentation. You're just trying a bunch of things, right? And if you think about like a toddler learning how to walk, you know, some of us now, especially parenting these days, I'm sure there are some parents that got a book and how do you do that? But in general, a baby learns how to walk and falls down and gets up again, and it's playful for them. You know, they don't have all the cognition around like, oh, I failed, or you know, oh, I'll never be good at walking. So I love the idea of play with adults.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The last 2 weeks, I've been writing about this mystery, not mastery. Like that was the topic for me,
cool.
because yeah, like because the same thing that Courtney struggles with was with the same thing that I struggle with. Like I always do something and then I feel like I need to try to master it like all the time, and it created a lot of stress and anxiety and pressure on myself. That's like didn't make any sense. So now every time I'm doing things, I'm thinking about like, let me be more intrigued by it, curious about it. What's the mystery in this? And I'm not trying to perfect this thing. So for me, that was the topic that I've been journaling, and it's interesting it came up. It's funny how the universe aligns, but for me, yeah, mystery, not mastery.
Love that one. I had to write that one down. That's good. Mystery. Yeah. Or even mystery within mastery.
Yeah. And if it's meant to be, something you end up finding your purpose in, right? Because that's other misconceptions that people think like we just woke up one day where we're like, this is our purpose. Like, there it is, I found it, and I mean that's my purpose. But no, it's not, right? It's a whole process, it's a whole journey of I think Angela Duckworth talks about, I forget her book, Grit or something, and she talks about like passion. It's like a process you discover, and then if you like, so you try lots of things, so discovery, and then you develop, like start to work towards it more, and then you deepen it, and that's how you find your purpose. It's not something that like you just wake up one day, and very few of us do. I guess there's exceptions to the rule, like, you know, the 2-year-old kid that was like playing the drums and is now whatever. Like there are obviously exceptions, but for the vast majority of us, that's not how we find our purpose. We find it through play and mystery and curiosity, and then as adults we lose all of that, and then we wonder why we have no purpose, because we lost the ability to just be in the moment and just to just be, like, be. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and of course I could go into, and I'm sure Renee would feel passionate about this, like a big topic, but you know, just how schooling systems essentially teach that, like that path, you know, like 18, now this is what you're going to do, and you're going to do it for the rest of your life, and it's your purpose, and it's like, it's so freaking serious, and there is no room for play within that system being built and teaching us, and it's very confined, right, this idea of like a career and what it really needs to look like. So I think there's a lot of different ways that we are taught on how it needs to look, on how it needs to be, that once again, bringing it back to what this community has been for us is, hey, if we rip all of that off and we just discover like who you really are, like how would you now show up in the world? And I just watched the very last week, because I did replays for CCA. I just watched the last week, and it was really cool to watch Randy go through. He had like that filtering process he was taking people through of kind of discovering like what was it that you were like as a kid, and if we can get back to that root of how you were as a kid, maybe it would be a lot easier to discover, you know, how you would actually want to show up in the world now. So
what I love about that is how far back the conditioning actually starts. I'm super obsessed with like this is an open space to say weird things, right? So I'm super fascinated by serial killers.
Oh, Renee. Yes, Renee. You're a weirdo too.
All the places like, this could go, I was not expecting that.
Like super fascinated. Like I was reading true crime books and like biographies of serial killers at a very young age because I really loved babies. And I could not wrap my head around at the age of 10, 12, whatever. Do you remember in like the bookstore when you used to go to bookstores and there was like the bargain bin section? I have to ask my parents if I actually still have this book, but it was literally like a biography of every serial killer. Why she allowed me to buy that, I'm not sure. But
amazing. This is amazing. I love learning these things about you, Renee. It's great.
But I love babies, and like, how does one go from cute, smiley, happy baby to serial killer, which got me really interested in human behavior, which got me interested in nature versus nurture. And so it's, you know, in having my own children and with a lot of the topics in the world, like how far back do you go with babies? And like, I would even hazard to say, even within the womb, if you have to have certain beliefs to go there, but like baby is born, right? Then you're picking, you know, the girl diapers and the boy diapers, color wise, or pink and blue, and then green and yellow if you weren't sure, you weren't going to find out. Like there's all these little nuanced things that are very normal that have been happening. But you even think about, like, this was really fascinating to me. A lot of firstborns are perfectionists. And I look at my 3 children who are very, very different kiddos. But I can see some of the tendencies with my oldest that are very much conditioned by me. But with firstborn, here's my theory. I have no scientific data and I didn't do any research on this. But, like, you spend so much time with your firstborn. And I always use the example of like the old wooden box with the shape holes in it, and then you have the block itself that's the shape, and you sit with your firstborn for hours potentially, like, and they're like barely can move their body, and you're putting the space in the hand, and you're like, which one? And they, and they finally get it in the right one. And oftentimes the language that I'll hear, I'll observe and in myself and in other people, like, try again, try again. Then they get it right, and it's like, woohoo! And there's like this big hoopla. Where do you think perfectionism comes from? Like, I have just taught my child to be a perfectionist, and I look at my third that I joke around. I started my business 3 weeks before she was born. She literally was like an accessory under my arm, like, come on, let's go. Like, never had shoes on, barely had clothes on. She raised herself, and she is the most creative, like, has no limit kind of free spirit. I'm just like, birth order matters, looking at the way we parent matters. And so, like, what if we just take our kids and, in one of you was talking about this, but like, if you look at who the child is and what can you do from there versus what most of us parents do, we look at what kind of kid do we want? What kind of child do we want? And we try and make them that thing.
Wow.
And so it's like the unlearning you were talking about is really like the unparenting. Like, get out of the way. Just get out of their way. Allow them to be who they are. And then, so my theory from pre-kids was that parenting is birth to 5, and everything after that is tweaking. Because when you find out, like, Joyce, they come out and they're like a person.
They got their own.
Like, they are a person from second 1. Like, the moment they come out, there's a personality, there's a person in there, and then we're trying to teach them how to be a certain way. So if you just like let them out and then let them be, and then tweak because you want to align with your values, but like, and then language plays a huge part in that. Like, I'm conditioning them in other ways. I know that. And I know that they're going to go to therapy for some other reason that I thought I was like, woohoo, I did a great job. But having said that, like, language is important. Like, even I watch my husband, like, telling the kids thing. I'm like, why don't you ask them what they think? Or what, like, when they asked me a question when they were younger, I would give multiple perspectives, see what they think about that, and then say, well, what we believe in our family or what we think. And when you're older and you have, more experiences, you can choose what you think. But that keeping that space open for them is so important. And it's like, yeah, it's fascinating. I went from serial killers to that, but
That was amazing. No, I wasn't expecting serial killers. I didn't know you could take serial killers in that beautiful direction, but
Yes.
so many, like, I don't have kids and Yelena doesn't have kids, but I can take so much away from what you just shared. Like, the wisdom you have in your experience understanding children and our what's the word, conditioning is so insightful for us to be able to understand, like, even just within ourselves, like
within yourself. Yeah.
Unparenting. And I'm just thinking, like, holy moly. And I would even go to believe when you said we try to create the kids the way we think they should be. And again, expectations, it's probably, this is just my assumption, probably trying to make the kids everything we never let ourselves,
Totally.
like,
Yeah.
Well, and it's also to give like, all of us, to give ourselves grace that, like, so much of our perfectionism or so much of whatever the challenges that we have are, not our fault, but with the awareness of where it came from, we can start unlearning or redeveloping or reframing instead of beating ourselves up over it,
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good key point. I think that we touch on a lot within our little crew with us ladies, and it got brought up last call I had with Joey and Dicka in the Luna Wolf Den in Sparta was, hey, these reflections about yourself is not so that you develop more judgment and shame and guilt about how you are now. Like, none of this is to shine light and be like, oh crap, like, I'm a mess. It's more to be like, no, these things this is real, this is reality, and it's okay.
Yeah. And I think it's like the CCA principle of, like, you have to know where you are.
Yes.
And know exactly where you are. Like, I have zero, like I could hate my parents for so many things, and I love my parents, and they gave me a great life. But there are many things I could have been in therapy for, but I don't blame them, and I don't know what it is about me or my upbringing that took that direction of like there's no blame. It makes me who I am today, and the things that could have been done better, then I just have as the okay, this is where I am. That's probably where that came from, because if I ignore it, then I'm going in a different direction, and I can't, correct in the way that I want to live my life. So
Yeah, I think that what you're speaking to, like, oh, you not having that blame is a radical responsibility to be able to look at the truth and the facts of what is without a lens of judgment or having expectations that it needed to
yeah,
be differently. And
or attaching meaning that isn't necessarily there. Because oftentimes we don't talk to our parents about these things, and then you find out their perspective. You're like, oh, that had nothing to do with me.
yeah,
And 99% it never, and 99% it
So it
never
never
does.
does. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we create narratives in our mind, like I don't know where I read this study again. Don't quote me, who knows? But like there was something about like if we both experienced the thing, like siblings, if we went on a family vacation, for example, like siblings would have very different recall memory of
Totally.
the experience, even though we
Totally.
were both there, right? And so that's why like attaching some sort of narrative to a thing based on what you think somebody else was doing is doesn't make any sense, right? It's just like I
Yeah.
think all of this is about getting to the point where we stop victimizing or maybe placing blame and taking radical responsibility for like everybody was doing the best that they can at the time, and right, everyone
Yeah.
tried to make their best decision at the time that they made it given the information and experience that they had. And so now as adults, right, we have a choice to either improve ourselves and try to create something different, or we
Hmm.
just continue to blame others and go down the path, right? And so that's what's so cool about CCA is that it gives you some filters or frameworks to kind of see how you're showing up there, and then also make a different decision towards the kind of person you want to be or who you're becoming in this. And then back to your point, Renee, like in I think parents, because I'm a parent and also we run a youth sports organization, and I think sports is a big magnifier of all this. If you think
Oh yeah.
school, like when you see sports, like parents living vicariously through their children left and right, and like um putting all like trying to have their kids fit this mold, and it just creates a ton of broken children, I feel like, if we
And
look at like
adults.
why. Yeah, and broken adults, right? And the best thing we can do as parents, again, no judgment, I'm a parent and I mess this up all the time, but just being aware that they are their own person. Yes, they're 5 years old, or yes, they're 10, or yes, they're 12, but they are their own person. And what we can do as a parent, the best thing we can do is love them unconditionally and support who they are, because they're very, very different. Like we've talked about my daughter, she's like my oldest daughter is like totally different than my youngest daughter. And if I try to put them both in a box, and like it would never work. And my biggest goal with my oldest daughter is not to break her spirit, but for her to feel that she's unique, because every kid is unique, every person's unique, but that she can step into that power. And I see it because Ben and I are very careful about our language, right? Language is so important. It doesn't just describe the world we live in, it creates it.
That's it.
So we have to remember that our language is powerful. But yeah, so I see some parents with their language, like with sports too. Like kids are specializing in sports at such a young age. Like at 5 years old, their parents think they're going to be a professional. Like they're betting on their kid to be like a professional athlete or something at 5. And it's like, then we're taking out all the mystery and the play out of a thing. And so we have to be really careful as adults, our baggage that we bring forward. That's why this is the most important work that we could do, for the people around, for ourselves, and also the people around us, is to be more aware of how we are showing up, because it has great effect on our closest loved ones.
I think what
Um,
you said too is important about what you just said about we have to be aware of who we are, but also, in talking about kids and the recall of like the memory or whatever, there's who we perceive ourselves, but then there's how others perceive you also. And the word that keeps coming up in this call for me is like the non-judgment aspect, like no judgment. But in order to not have that judgment, there's there's the non-judgment, but there's just like understanding the multiple perspectives that can happen. And one of the phrases I always use with kids, and that I've found in the past several years applies to adults too, is that every behavior communicates a need. So if you understand that every behavior communicates a need, when something happens with someone and you have a perception of them, or the judgment arises, or whatever it is understanding that there's a need that's needed there, but they're also coming right from a different perspective. And so something that happened recently, and I think even though it's with my kiddo, I think it applies, it's helped me just like see other humans in a different way, is when I said earlier with my 6-word update, how January really kicked off just like so busy. And I had work, and then we had to reschedule things. So I used to do pickup with my kids. I had to work with my husband to make sure that he could do pickup, because now I had calls all day. All this stuff was happening, and I was just trying to logistically make sure that everybody got where they needed. So imagine this, like even as if you're a child, right? Your mom picks you up from school, she's with you in the afternoon, makes dinner, all the stuff, right? To all of a sudden just poof, gone. What I realized like 4 months into this with my daughter, I don't even remember the words she said, but the sense was that she felt abandoned. She's 12. And like, it was basically, I abandoned her because I was literally picking her up every day, but I never communicated. And we talk about this in CCA, the importance of communication. And all of a sudden I was gone, and I was off with my son and doing lacrosse stuff. And we pay a toll to go to a bridge. So I would just take him to practice. I would sit in the car for 2 hours and do work and wait there instead of coming home. So I did not put myself in her shoes. Like, I was just gone. I get like teary thinking about it. The beauty is we were able to have this conversation. She was able to have the wisdom enough to be able to communicate it. I was open enough to be able to hear it as a parent, right? Because, some parents, you could take that as like criticism or something. And it was just this like light bulb moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, you like, now literally I could feel myself sitting from looking through her eyes, that I had disappeared. And I was home every night, but I wasn't getting home till 10 o'clock. And then I was got her off to school, and that's a brief moment in time. So like, she wasn't seeing me all day. And that was such a huge eye opener for me. Like, what is that bias? The G.I. Joe bias. Even if you know something, it doesn't mean that you can like apply it or see it. And it was just one of those things, like, even though I know, I don't know. There's so much I don't know. And so that was like that shifted so much for me, just seeing it from her shoes.
Oh, so beautiful, Renee. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that we have so much to learn just from you and Joyce, like taking these principles and just noticing them within your parenting is it's so profound, but also useful. I think even for those of us who don't have kids, just as we were saying earlier, to understand these things about ourselves, because also like the way kids learn, like there is no filters. And earlier Joyce made a mention of boxes, and something actually that Brandon Straza said recently to me that really stuck with me. Someone asked him, what's the number one thing you've learned about fatherhood? And he said, how like as adults we're always talking about how we want to be out of the box, and like we don't want to be put in boxes. Well, with kids, like there's no box. Like if you told them about a box, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like I don't even know that this thing is. And so I think learning from a child's perspective of these things is like, holy crap, there's just no filters. And that in itself is like, it could provide us like, again, a quantum leap in our ability to understand or unlearn, all of these things. So I really, really appreciate the way that you see these principles playing out between you, your kids, in the preschool, etc. It's very, very insightful.
That's great. Thanks for being vulnerable, Renee, because I think that's the biggest thing. Why I love this community, because to share that, right? Like, we're living in the truth of it right now. Like, we're not like,
Yeah.
oh,
It's
I can tell
everywhere.
the amount of times I do the wrong things with my kids, right? And I'm like, oh, but now I live in minutes and moments
Yeah.
instead of dwelling in shame and guilt for like months and years. Now we can have open communication around what is happening. Like, what do you feel, and how
Yeah.
is this happening? And that reminds me of Allegiance Capital. Been trying to incorporate that more of like, here's what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. So like with your daughter, like, because we have a tendency, we're moving so quick, right? We just assume that, oh, she knows I'm here, like I
Totally.
picked her up. Yeah, like, how can I
She knows
imagine
I'm at
here?
lacrosse with her brother. Like, what's the big deal?
That's a big thing, because that's something that Ben and I are going through right now with our daughter, because our oldest plays hockey and she's going like 5 days a week, and our youngest doesn't. So it's like, now we have to get super, super, super intentional on how I spend time with my oldest and how Ben spends time with our youngest, because if we don't communicate that well,
Yeah.
they're gonna perceive it differently. Right? They may come up with their own story, and so I think just having that space, like, to communicate. And
Joyce, your audio is a little low. You're going in and out.
Oh, was that her? I was playing with mine. Like, oh, is that mine?
Can you hear me now?
It's still a little low. It's
still
weird
low.
though, because it like just happened.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Well, we can.
Yeah.
If you talk loud, I can hear you. You just gotta yell.
I'll talk loudly. This is the case where Ben's always telling me to talk quiet. Turn the volume
Inside voice.
down. He's like,
Not today.
You are screaming at me. I'm like, oh, sorry. I'm very excited.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So for me, it was just like, your story helps me now, because I may have made that mistake thinking that, like, okay, my youngest daughter knows we're bringing Riley to hockey. Like, now I can have that conversation and make sure I'm constantly checking in, not once, but weekly, or however often I feel like we need to do that, to make sure her narrative is a positive one, or, and not something that's way off. So I think that was very helpful to me. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
This has been so insightful of just hearing both of you share those experiences. What I'm taking away from it is that so much of our experience is like determined by the lens and the stories that we perceive and see things through. And so understanding our own lenses and stories, but also the people around us, right? It's like, what is the story or the lens or the meaning that they are creating or I'm creating about this situation? That in itself could just, we can talk about that for hours.
Well, and it's like the CCA part of it would be like biases. I mean, it's now getting to communicate in our own language, as you said, Elena, like lenses, filters, stories. But it's been a topic that I went into a lot with Joey and Digga, but I think it's such an important one, is recognizing like we are all biased, and we can all just recognize that about ourselves. There's a lot of freedom that comes within it. So
I have another quick story that's super present because it happened 2 days ago. It's been happening a couple of times, but with my husband. So just relationships in general, right? Like, he is way playful, way more playful than I am. But for so long, like, I'm just like, stop being weird. And or I'll just be like, you are so weird. Like, he'll do things with the kids. I'm like, you are so weird. And so with CCA, for me, there's been a feeling with being up with all these amazing people. And I'm like, oh God, I'm not weird enough. So
we are a bunch of weirdos.
So 2 days ago, we're in the car, and I don't know, he'll like break out into song, or he'll just like, he's a theater guy too, so he'll just like break into these things. I'm like, you need to go into like theater and get it out, right? So he does it in the car, and I looked at him and I was like, you're so weird. And I was like, I caught myself like, no, I need to celebrate weird. I can't model that for my kids, but two, just from the CCA stuff. And like immediately I was like, no, you keep doing what you're doing. I need to be, like, and So then we were laughing about it. He's like, "That's so funny." That, like, I literally stopped like midstream. Like, no, be weird. That's good.
Renee, just come hang out with PD and I every once in a while. The weird level in this house is absurd, and
That'll be my therapy. I need to do that. I need to hang out with people. I mean, I grew up in such a like, you know, kind of keep up with the Joneses. Like, don't do any. Well, because I have immigrant parents, so like, I tried so hard to do anything not to stand out for decades, and that's the stuff I've been unraveling because my dad, they're from the Philippines. They came over at like 21. We grew up in a like lily white middle to upper class community, and my dad's basically thing was like, when in Rome, do as the Romans. So I was constantly observing my environment for like, in the Philippines, you eat with the spoon in your right hand and the fork, and you push the food on the spoon and you eat with the spoon. Well, no, everybody ate with a fork. And when I went to like I remember this at like 4 or 5, I went to eat dinner at someone's house and I went to pick up my spoon. And then like, because I was constantly observing, noticed, and I switched really quick to do that. And so I realized like, oh my gosh, my whole life I've been trying to fit in. So I'm learning how to be weird now and trying to embrace weirdness. So I need to hang out more weird people.
right here. This is great. You're right at home.
I know. It's wonderful.
It's good stuff.
Seattle.
Yeah. I'm so sad I won't be there in Seattle with you all. Have a blast without me. But not too much fun, please.
We'll eat with spoons, Joyce.
Yes. Next one. I'm going to share with you guys in our CCA girls group a picture. Ben and I went to Disneyland, took the girls on Thursday, and I have to share a picture. This will be the epitome of our relationship, how weird I am, and Ben. So it'll be very fun.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Do I have permission to send this? And he's like, yes. I'm like, okay, I will. So I will share, and maybe I'll share in the CCA office. That is possible.
We're looking forward to it. I'm excited to see it.
I can't wait.
Our relationship, the weirdness that I bring, and I think Ben's starting to get a little weird too now. So
Ben and I will work on it. We'll get weird.
What a great way to promote our community. Is like the whole goal, our only goal is how weird can we get? I need to be more weird. Right. The weirder the better. This has been a lot of fun. I will say I really appreciate all you ladies jumping on. It's just this, as we all already experience on our weekly calls, it's so fun to just get together and share and reflect. And this is truly how it is like learning together is also just having fun and like, speaking of weird, like embracing these things about ourselves and also using each other as a mirror, like the reflection piece. And I'm grateful for that opportunity with another woman because I think that's what it is. It's an opportunity to learn about ourselves through. And that's the other, I think, part of 6 word updates that Nick talks a lot about is when you read other people's 6 word updates, you actually get a chance to learn about whether it's CCA or crypto or Nixmas, whatever, through someone else's, again, lens. And that in itself could bring a whole different perspective we may not have thought of. So I really appreciate that about each of you. And this has been fun.
This has been great. One of the things about CCA, just to close out, that we talk about open loops. And I know a lot of this was maybe focused on parenting or maybe perceived as parenting. And so an invitation I have is if you notice yourself watching this, asking or telling yourself like, oh, that doesn't apply to me, I don't have kids. Keep that loop open and see how it applies or what you can pull away from it that might apply or be relevant.
Yes, I am so glad you said that. I'm really glad you said that because it's really easy to go into content believing immediately if it's like not what I was looking for and searching for, like this isn't what I need, but there's always an opportunity to learn something. And open loop, keep it there, let it be what it is for now. And over time, it might reveal something, like as Joyce was speaking about how we learn in CCA, it's not that immediate, like Dan or Randy or Nick teaches something and it clicks. It's they say something, okay, that makes sense, but I watch it play out in my life, and as I see it, then I'm actually learning. So that's really what these conversations are here for. So I'm glad you bring that up. I hope this was useful for people, and maybe we'll do more in the future. We'll chat about it as a crew and see how that feels and how that goes. So if you're live or watching the replay, definitely leave your 6-word update in the comments, please, and reflect and share what it is that you got out of this. And maybe we'll see. This is no promises. Maybe we'll do a style like a Q&A where we'll bring in people to be able to ask questions, potentially in a more private setting. We'll see. But any last thoughts before we wrap up? No. Joyce is speaking, but I can't hear you.
Oh, shit.
What?
Can you hear
There.
me?
Now we can. Yeah.
Okay, I was just gonna say something just sits in my head that I hear Nick saying all the time. It's up to you to extract the value, and that's what he says on his calls. So there's value in everything all your experiences that you have, and it's up to us when we take radical accountability. It's our job to extract the value.
Yeah,
Love
I
that.
love it. Thank you for that. That was great. Well, wonderful. We'll wrap it up there.